November 24th, 1326. The marketplace of Hereford is packed, nobles in heavy cloaks, priests gripping their crosses, merchants, beggars, peasants, all pressed together for one reason: to watch a man be destroyed. Dragged onto the wooden scaffold is Hugh Despenser the Younger. Once the king's most trusted favourite, he had ruled England through greed, fear, and ambition. Now, gaunt from days of self-starvation and dressed in rags, he is about to face a death so savage that chroniclers would struggle to describe it. This is the story of how one man rose to stand beside the king and fell in pieces before a roaring crowd. If you want more of history's darkest tales, don't forget to subscribe. Hugh Despenser the Younger was born around 1286 into privilege. His father served King Edward I faithfully. His mother came from one of the most powerful families in England. From the start, Hugh's future seemed secure: wealth, influence, and a path straight into the king's service. That future opened wide in 1307 when Edward II took the throne. The new king was already infamous for surrounding himself with favourites. His first companion, Piers Gaveston, had flaunted his power so openly that the nobility murdered him in 1312. Into that dangerous void stepped Hugh. By 1316, he wasn't just another courtier, he was chamberlain, living at the king's side, with access no one else could match. What began as loyalty quickly turned into dominance. Despenser wasn't only serving the king, he was shaping him. And before long, England itself would feel the weight of his ambition. Hugh knew that wealth was power, and he wanted more of both. In 1316, he married Eleanor de Clare, the king's niece. The match wasn't just a family tie, it delivered him the lordship of Glamorgan in Wales, one of the richest prizes in the kingdom. But Hugh wasn't satisfied. Using his influence over Edward II, he set about building an empire. Nobles were stripped of their estates through legal tricks, widows were robbed of inheritances, even his own sister-in-law was forced to hand over her lands. Few dared resist. With the king behind him, Hugh was untouchable. When rebellion briefly forced him into exile in 1321, he revealed just how ruthless he could be. Instead of lying low, he turned pirate, raiding English merchant ships in open defiance of the crown he supposedly served. By 1322, Edward II had crushed his baronial enemies. Hugh returned to England stronger than ever. Alongside his father, he tightened his grip on the kingdom. Chroniclers would later write that Despenser was king in all but name. And for the next 4 years, that wasn't far from the truth. As Hugh's power grew, so did the hatred around him. By the early 1320s, he had stripped so many nobles of land and wealth that resentment boiled over. Few men in England had collected as many enemies as Hugh Despenser. But it wasn't only greed that made him despised. It was the whispers. Chroniclers claimed his relationship with Edward II went far beyond friendship. In a medieval world where accusations of sodomy meant sin against God and crime against society, the rumor was dynamite. Whether true or not, it gave his enemies the perfect weapon. No one loathed him more than Queen Isabella. Her lands were seized, her influence reduced, and worst of all, her children were taken from her and placed under the care of Hugh's wife. For the Queen, this was no longer politics, it was humiliation. And humiliation demanded revenge. By 1325, Queen Isabella had been pushed to the edge. Her estates were seized, her influence stripped away, and her children taken from her custody and placed with Hugh's family. Publicly, she remained the Queen of England. Privately, she was a prisoner in her own court, and she blamed Hugh Despenser. That year, she was sent to France to negotiate peace. Instead, she found freedom. In Paris, she met Roger Mortimer, a baron who had escaped the Tower of London after rising against the Despensers. Their alliance was sealed by politics and by passion. Together, they plotted Hugh's destruction. In September 1326, they landed in England with a small band of mercenaries. It should have been hopeless. Instead, it was a lightning strike. Years of resentment exploded, and nobles abandoned Edward II in droves. Hugh the Elder was the first victim, captured at Bristol and executed without delay, hanged in his armor before being beheaded and quartered. His body was left for the dogs. Edward II and Hugh the Younger fled west into Wales with the royal treasury. But their power had evaporated. Betrayed near Neath, they were captured. For Edward, it meant the crown. For Hugh, it meant something far worse. Hugh Despenser never stood a chance. In November 1326, he was hauled before a tribunal led by Queen Isabella, Roger Mortimer, and the barons he had robbed and humiliated for years. The list of charges, treason, theft, corruption, was long, but the verdict had been written before he even entered the room. This wasn't a trial. It was payback. On November 24th, the marketplace of Hereford became a stage. Thousands packed the square, waiting for the show. Hugh was tied to a tall ladder so every eye could see him. A crown of nettles was forced onto his head. Verses condemning pride and greed were smeared across his skin. Then came the horror. His genitals were hacked off and burned before his eyes, a cruel nod to the rumors about his relationship with Edward II. Still alive, his stomach was cut open. His entrails were dragged out slowly and tossed into the fire. Chroniclers wrote that his screams echoed across the square, a sound so raw it thrilled the crowd. Only after this torture was he hanged. But death didn't end the humiliation. His head was cut off, his body quartered, the pieces sent to cities across England. His head spiked above London's gates. This was more than an execution. It was a performance designed to strip Hugh of power, destroy his memory, and terrify anyone who might follow in his steps. Despenser's death was more than punishment. It was a message. Every step of the execution had been chosen with care. The crown of nettles mocked his stolen authority. The castration, carried out in front of the crowd, was meant to erase the rumors of his intimacy with Edward II and mark him as unclean. The burning of his entrails symbolized the purging of corruption from the kingdom itself. For the victors, it wasn't enough to kill Hugh. They had to dismantle him, piece by piece, and turn his body into a warning. His fall was theatre, and England was the audience. For centuries, Hugh Despenser was remembered as the monster of Edward II's reign, the greedy favourite who bled England dry. Chroniclers painted him as ruthless, corrupt, and perverse, the man who deserved every ounce of the horror he endured. But history is never that simple. Modern historians agree Hugh was ambitious and cruel, yet they also point out how accusations of sodomy were often political weapons. To smear a rival as immoral was an easy way to strip him of legitimacy. Whether Hugh and Edward were truly lovers may never be known, but the rumor shaped how both men were remembered. What is certain is the impact of Hugh's fall. In just a few years, he rose from relative obscurity to near total power, only to end as a mutilated body displayed across the kingdom. His story is a reminder of how quickly fortune turns, and how dangerous it was to stand too close to the crown. Hugh Despenser rose to the heights of power and was destroyed in the most brutal way imaginable. His fate is a stark reminder that greed and ambition can turn allies into enemies and power into death.